gluten bad for endometriosis? In this video, we break down what gluten is, what actual research says about gluten-free diets and endo pain, who should absolutely avoid gluten, and how to try a smarter, whole foods first approach to gluten removal. If you haven't already, please give this video a like, share it with a friend, and hit that subscribe button. Now on to the video. So what is gluten? Gluten is a family of proteins including gliadin and glutenin, naturally found in wheat, all types like spelt, durum, einkorn, farro, rye, barley, and the hybrid triticale. It gives bread dough stretch and structure. You'll also find hidden gluten in foods like sauces, beer, and processed items. So what does the research say about gluten and endometriosis? One retrospective Italian study followed 207 people with painful endometriosis symptoms for a year, 12 months. The study participants adhered to a gluten-free diet. The results showed that about 75% of these participants reported pain improvement and quality of life improvements. It's important to note that this study was not randomized, nor was the difference between processed gluten sources compared against whole food gluten sources. Despite not having a lot of direct high quality research on this topic, a large database analysis suggested that women with diagnosed celiac disease have around a 2% higher risk of endometriosis diagnosed compared with women without celiac disease. It's well known that endometriosis is associated with a higher risk of several autoimmune conditions and not just celiac disease. Another thing that complicates the question, is gluten bad for endometriosis, is tolerance and symptoms from consuming gluten-containing foods. A 2025 randomized single-blind crossover feeding study found a low FODMAP diet significantly reduced GI symptoms in endometriosis compared with guideline-based control diets. This type of research suggests that for some people, it's fermentable sugars like fructans in wheat and not gluten protein driving bloating and pain symptoms. Bottom line from the literature so far, there's promising but low quality evidence that going gluten-free may reduce pain for a subset of people with endometriosis, solid evidence that those with celiac disease must avoid gluten, and growing evidence that managing FODMAPs can tame GI symptoms common in endometriosis patients. Universal gluten bans aren't supported by strong trials yet. So, is gluten bad for endometriosis? Short answer, no. Gluten isn't proven to worsen lesions or disease progression. Some individuals report less pain off gluten, but the research why this might occur is unclear. Others report no change. If you don't have a gluten-related disorder and you're thriving symptom-wise, there's no evidence you must avoid gluten. So what is my creative take? Whole food first gluten trial. This is my suggestion if you're unsure if the effort is worth it. Instead of jumping to ultra processed gluten-free products, try a 4-week whole food trial. This involves avoiding only processed forms of gluten found in cakes, muffins, crackers, white breads, white wraps, pastries, and similar products. Instead, lean into whole food, minimally processed sources like sourdough, sprouted grain bread, whole wheat pasta, durum, spelt, barley, and triticale. Track things like pelvic pain scores, bloat, IBS symptoms, energy, bowel habits, any changes in mood, and any changes in NSAID use. Why this might work? Well, it's not gluten-free. It is processed and highly refined gluten source-free. Whole food, minimally processed sources of gluten-containing foods are naturally very, very high in health-promoting and inflammation-reducing nutrients like fiber, zinc, magnesium, B vitamins, iron, manganese, selenium, plant-based protein, and resistant starches. All right, so just to conclude our video today, who should absolutely be avoiding gluten? For starters, people with celiac disease. If you have been diagnosed with celiac disease, you must adhere to a strict, lifelong gluten-free diet. No exceptions. But keep in mind, if you are preparing to test for celiac, you do need to consume gluten for an accurate result. The next set of people who should absolutely avoid gluten are those with a wheat allergy. Ingesting wheat-containing foods will trigger your immune system and generate a lot of inflammation, which can blow back on your endometriosis symptoms and fertility. The next group are individuals with dermatitis, herpetiformis, and or gluten ataxia. Dermatitis Herpetiformis is a chronic, intensely itchy, blistering skin condition caused by an autoimmune reaction to gluten ingestion. Gluten ataxia is a rare autoimmune neurological condition where antibodies triggered by gluten attack parts of the cerebellum, the area of the brain responsible for balance and coordination. If you strongly suspect non-celiac wheat or gluten sensitivity, consider a structured elimination rechallenge under supervision to confirm, but do not self-diagnose celiac while already being gluten-free. It will complicate your testing and your test results. The last criteria for gluten removal that makes my list is anyone who has infertility or subfertility. While it is not a requirement for you to remove gluten from your diet, and it might not be helpful at all, but due to the overlap between endometriosis and autoimmune disorders, it could be a good idea to follow a gluten-free diet while trying to conceive. I would say this is especially so if you have elevated thyroid antibodies, have a diagnosis of some other autoimmune condition, or if you get symptomatic from ingesting gluten. So what are some considerations on a gluten-free diet? Be mindful of these possible nutrient gaps on a gluten-free diet. So specifically fiber, iron, B vitamins, and sometimes iodine. Choose iron-rich proteins, legumes as tolerated, seeds, leafy greens, and consider fortified gluten-free grains, and discuss labs with your clinician. So that brings us to the end of our video. Head to the link in my show notes to get your hands on my free gluten-free guide. This can help guide you on some essential pantry staples and must-know details about going gluten-free. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share with a friend if you found this video helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.